Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 14 Plus has been out a little over 6 months, so I thought we'd revisit it as many of you have asked me to and see how it's held up. This is actually in full-time use since its release day. It's actually being used by my daughter, but it's in full-time use. It has a screen protector on it that's heavily cracked. It's been dropped multiple times, so I thought we'd talk about durability, how it's holding up, what the battery is like, and much more. Now, the first thing is, according to recent sales, supposedly it's selling better than the Mini. Apple decided to get rid of the Mini iPhones with the 12 and 13 Mini and replace it with the Plus. Supposedly, they're going to do the exact same thing this year and keep the Plus lineup for the iPhone 15. So again, we won't have an iPhone 15 Mini, but rather an iPhone 15 Plus. I don't know if it's actually selling better than the Mini, as I still see more Minis in the public than I do Plus phones. But let me know what you think about that in the comments below. Now, the design, size, and weight is almost identical to that of what we have before with the 13 Pro Max. So it feels very similar, although it is a little bit lighter. Of course, it doesn't have an extra camera, and it's made of aluminum and is a little bit lighter because of that. Now, it's been in this case the whole time. We'll check that out a little bit later, but this is actually nice and light because it's aluminum around the outside edges, and because it's had a case, it's held up really well. As you can see here, there's not really any blemish on it whatsoever, although we don't have that SIM card slot in the United States, which some might find annoying. This is held up really well. You can see it's been protected and then just has a little bit of debris on the bottom where it was opened up on the bottom of the case. Now, the back has no scratches whatsoever, and the glasses have actually been well protected. The sapphire glass over the cameras, there's no scratches or bumps or dings there or anything. The case did a good job at protecting that. So no issues there, but this has been dropped multiple times, and if we turn off the screen here, you can see the screen protector with multiple cracks. Let's go ahead and remove this, see how it's actually held up. I've replaced the screen protector multiple times for some reason because my daughter continues to drop this. And she is fairly careful, but for some reason it just keeps dropping for her. But it hasn't harmed this at all. It's just left this outline here. Let me go ahead and clean this off a little bit. And in general, ceramic shield tends to hold up pretty well. I shared with my 14 Pro Max where there are a couple sort of scratches in it. You can see there, ceramic shield does hold up well, but there's a couple little gouges there. And a screen protector, of course, takes care of that. I'll link some in the description if you want to check them out. But in general, it's a pretty good phone. It's held up durability-wise without an issue. Now, as far as the battery life, well, that depends, of course, on how you use it, but let's check it out. We'll go into settings, and then we'll go over to battery health and charging. We're still at 100%, and you can see the overall cycle count here. It hasn't been used a ton compared to my phone, but it's actually been used every single day since the launch, so it's holding up just fine. The battery life itself, well, it's not the main device used all day long. Typically, it's used along with an iPad or a computer, and you can see here. So 25% usage is getting her about 2 hours and 3 minutes of screen on time, 6 hours and 2 minutes of screen off time. So it's holding up pretty well that way, no issues there, and it would easily get her 8 hours of screen on time if she continued to use this throughout the day. So you can see as we go back, this is currently on iOS 16.4, the latest version, but again, 2 hours, 39 minutes with just over 25% usage. That's pretty great battery life, and this is one of the best battery life phones out there. Apple says it's the best, but it depends on what you're doing. It's very similar to that of the 14 Pro and to the 14 Pro Max phones, so it holds up really well. Now, as far as charging, of course, it's the same as anything else, and the way this one has been charged is just how I charge my phone. It's put on a MagSafe charger, typically MagSafe compatible charger, at night, left there, charged, taken off the charger in the morning, sometimes put on the charger while in the car, but typically just put on at night and then used all day and then put back on at night again and left there. Apple does a pretty good job of managing heat with that. It actually has a temperature sensor with MagSafe, and it just keeps the heat where it should be while it bumps the charge up to what you need, holds it at 80% until you wake up, and keeps it up to 100%, or bumps it up to 100 by the time you wake up. So it's holding up really well. Now, one of the downsides of this phone, of course, is its display. While that doesn't mean it's a bad display, it looks great, has great viewing angles, and is plenty bright in sunlight. It's definitely no display compared to the 14 Pro Max, where we have up to 2,000 nits of brightness, ProMotion, and an always-on display. The Plus phones don't get that, where the Pro and Pro Max do. So you don't have that or the dynamic island, and that's a little bit of a shame since we should at least get 120 Hertz ProMotion. There's no reason for this phone not to have it. The 13 Pro Max had it. The Plus is the same size screen. It definitely could have it, but it's not there. Now, this isn't aimed at people where this would be a feature that would bother people, but this is definitely something you can see a difference in when you're scrolling and doing those sorts of things. So that's one major disadvantage. However, I haven't heard my daughter complain about it once. She didn't even care, to be honest. So I don't think it's aimed at people where this is a bother. Also, PWM doesn't bother my eyes on this phone, where it doesn't bother my eyes on the 14 Pro Max. While this isn't as good as the Pro and Pro Max phones as far as PWM or the way it controls brightness, it still does flicker at a lower rate, and at 240 frames per second, you can see that the screen is flashing more than the Pro Max phone, but for most people, this is plenty high enough that it won't bother your eyes unless you're super sensitive to the way the display is controlling brightness. If it's being bothered, well, then you may want to consider an iPhone 11 that doesn't do that with an LCD display, but in general, this should be good for most users. Now, as far as the cameras go, the good news is all of the cameras this year were upgraded with an autofocus system for the forward-facing camera. So that's a good sign, and if we go into the camera, flip it around here, we have up to 4K 60 HDR, and if we go into video, we'll hit record. Now we're recording with the forward-facing camera of the 14 Plus. It does a really great job, just as good as the Pro Max pretty much, no difference really there at all, and the audio is pretty good as well. In some cases, it may actually be a little bit better for some reason, so it seems to be doing a great job if you want to use it to vlog, you just want to create short clips, FaceTime, or anything else, it should work really well for that. Now, the rear cameras may be better in some ways than the latest cameras because there's been quite a few complaints on the latest phones where they actually don't do a great job at processing them. The latest 48 megapixel camera on the Pro Max phones have caused a bit of an issue for some people. While I would say they're very good for video, there's a focal distance issue that's not great for some. And what I mean by that is the minimum focal distance here. If we go into the camera, you'll see here, you have to sort of go into macro to get really close. So it will switch to macro. We'll just go to photo here. You've got a macro mode, and we can get close, but not super close. So we actually can't get as close as we could with previous phones. And the reason for that is the lens has changed on the camera sensor itself. So we can actually get a little bit closer, even though we don't have macro. Of course, we can zoom in digitally, but it seems to do a better job if you want to maybe film video with this, getting really close to your subject. That's one of the advantages of the camera this year, and I don't see the heavy processing as much on this phone. That could be due to the sensor being something we've had for a while, or it could be due to the processor. But either way, I would say that's an advantage for this over the previous or the other Pro phones and maybe some of the previous ones. You've got upgraded internals, sort of, but you have great cameras. And speaking of the internals, it's pretty fast. We basically have the 13 Pro Max processor, and you'll see I ran Geekbench on the 13 Pro Max that I have here. If we go into Geekbench here as well, I ran it on the same update. We're both on 16.4, and you can see the overall results. We have a little bit better speed overall on the 14 Plus than we do on the 13 Pro Max, despite them having very similar processors. So you can see the results, 2268 versus 2129, and 5484 versus 4044. That's the results I'm getting. I find it's a little bit better that way, and it should be a little bit faster because of that. I don't think you'll really notice much of a difference, but it's definitely a little bit quicker. So that's a nice sign. And because it has the latest processor, we'll get iOS updates for probably at least 5 years. So typically Apple will support them with major updates for that long and longer. So I would expect at least 5 years support on this. Now, the other nice thing this has is crash detection and satellite connectivity. So if we go back out, go to Emergency SOS, you have the option here to call after a severe crash. Of course, we have that satellite connectivity if needed as well. If we go to the bottom, we can demo that. And so you can go into satellite connectivity. If you need this, you're out where you don't have a signal, you could use this to place an emergency call. It's great that it's integrated, and it's one advantage you have over previous generation phones. Hopefully you'll never have to use either of those, crash detection or satellite, but they're available if you do. And in daily use, I think this is a great phone. I would say with 5G, overall reception and Wi-Fi, it's been pretty good. I've had minimal complaints, if any, from my daughter with it. no real issues there, and in general, it seems to be a pretty good phone. The one complaint I've heard from my daughter on this phone is Siri, and that's more software related than hardware. So Siri tends to be a little bit of an issue for some people, is it's just not great. But I think we're all experiencing that, and that's nothing to hold against this phone. Now, if you're wondering if you should buy the 14 Plus or wait for the iPhone 15 or maybe pick up a 13 Pro Max, I would say it depends on what matters most. If you really have to have ProMotion, you have to have that on your display, or maybe even always on display, then of course you're going to have to go with a 14 Pro Max. But a 13 Pro Max is probably the better option here because you have 3 different cameras plus LiDAR, and you have a stainless steel body with that ProMotion on the display. So you get a little extra features, and you probably can get it at the same cost. However, there are a lot of discounts on the 14 Plus that may make it easy to just pick up close to free depending on your carrier's deals. So that's really going to depend on what you have as far as your carrier, where you live, and more. So if you can get this free, it's a phenomenal phone for that with support for many years. If it's at the full price, that's its major disadvantage. Apple really should have reduced the price on this significantly compared to what it actually is. I would say it may be $799, it would be an amazing buy, but now we have the 13 Pro Max that's used, or last year's phone that you can probably get for cheaper than this. So that's the big issue there. Now let's take a quick look at the case, as some people want to know how these hold up. This has been used full time with it. You can see it has a little chip out of the silicone here, and again here where she's dropped this continuously. So you can see around it, it's not great, and it's holding up okay, but I think it's probably going to need to be replaced at some point. Internally, it's actually kept the phone scratch-free. The microfiber's holding up okay, and the outside is keeping the phone protected, but it's definitely in a little bit of a challenging environment, it seems. So it's doing okay. It's doing its job. There's other cases for the same price that will do the job maybe even better and not wear out as quickly. But I just wanted to share that, what it's held up like. Everything else seems to be okay, but it seems to be sort of chipping and wearing out pretty quickly. So that's everything on the 14 Plus. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you think you'd pick one up, are you picking one up, or did you? Or are you going to wait for the iPhone 15? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.